morning or afternoon or very early morning. So first we will hear Beatriz Bissio. I've met her a few times at the Rise of Asia conference throughout the years. But Beatriz, I would let you present yourself with a few sentences because I'm afraid I won't be able to do it as glamorously.
Yeah, no problem. We are among friends here, no formalities. Well, at the present moment, I am a professor, associated professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Political Science Department, and also the postgraduate program in Comparative History. But I have been for more than 2 decades, almost 3 decades. I was worked as a journalist, particularly editing 3 magazines. The most important of them was one which is closely related with our main subject in the conference. It was called Third Word, and that is the one I will speak about. And the other ones were also important, but one of the other one was Ecology and Development. It also was a very pioneer experience in Brazil. It was launched 1 year before the Rio 92 conference. And the other one was dedicated to the integration project in Southern Latin America, Mercosur. So, but mine, I think my heart is very related to the experience of Third World, the Cuadernos del Tercer Mundo, which was a magazine, I think, an important experience in Latin American journalism, political journalism, and it was inspired. And therefore, I think it is interesting for you to know something about that experience. It was expired by the non-aligned conference in Algiers in 1973, where the founder of and the one who had the idea of launching such a magazine in Latin America was one of the journalists who was covering the conference, Neiva Moreira. At the time, a Brazilian journalist. At the time, he was in exile. It was 1973. Here in Brazil, the coup d'etat, it was in 1964. So he had been in exile for a decade and working as journalist at that moment in Uruguay, in Argentine, after having been in Bolivia, Uruguay, and so. So I can share my screen if you allow me.
I think you need some permission.
Yeah. I think you have to allow me. Yeah, I am. Yeah, let me see. Yeah.
It is supposed to be on the bottom of your screen, just right next to record. Can you see a green button that says
yeah, of course.
Screen?
Excellent, yeah. So here I put it. Please let me know when you.
I can see.
Yeah, we can see it.
It's appearing? Okay.
Yeah, Perfect.
So I call it a Latin American non-aligned political magazine because I think that's a summarized version of the aim of the magazine. So I was telling you that it was an initiative inspired by that conference in Algiers. And so Neva Moreira returned from Algiers with the idea that journalists all over the world could cooperate with the idea of promoting a new information order. Of course, the main idea of the conference, Algiers conference, was that the governments should take the initiative to create those means, journals, whatever possible. But he returned with the idea that we as journalists or journalists all over the world could also create their own ways to contribute to this idea of democratized media, and mainly the idea of creating medias with a very strong compromise with the ideals of non-alignment, yeah, and giving the voice to the third world. Yeah? So the idea was rapidly very well welcomed by some other journalists, and in September 1974 it was possible to launch the first edition in Buenos Aires in Argentina. Yeah, and it was only 7 or 8 months after that Perón, who was at the moment in the president, died, and the situation changed very quickly. So that period in Argentina was a very interesting and very important period, because the idea of having this kind of magazine was very strongly adopted by many Latin American journalists, but the political situation didn't allow the project to continue in Argentina. But sometime after that, well, there was repression. There was a very strong experience for each of us. The initial core group was obliged to abandon Argentina. By the time I was starting my experience as a journalist, and it was very sad to see the project, such an important project, not to be able to continue. But the political atmosphere was terrible, the repression, the murdering in the streets. So I think you know what the Argentina dictatorship has been. But later on, we had the chance to relaunch the magazine in Mexico, where at that time Mexico was the country in Latin America who was receiving most of the exiled people from all over Latin America, and Mexico had an experience in that way, from having received, for instance, the exiled leaders from Spain, from the dictatorship of Franco in Spain, and so and so. So I can say that the Mexican period was extraordinarily important also. In that period in Mexico, we had the chance to launch an English edition which was mainly focusing on the North America, the United States public, yeah. And it was very well received by many of the progressive, of course, segments of the American society, particularly in the southern part of the United States, the universities and popular movements. And we circulated through signatures, through how do you say, signature is not the word in English, through subscriptions. So here I am showing you some of our covers, yeah. And it was interesting also what I am showing you here, that in that period in Central America, Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, there were very important liberation, what we can say, liberation movements, progressive movements who were in armed struggle against their own dictatorships. And they used the magazine for the political education of their cadres. That was also very interesting for us to experience that. Yeah. So we had the opportunity. This is a picture of me with one of my interviews with Arafat. Yeah. Please tell me if it is appearing, because I'm not at this moment seeing you. Let me see here.
You can see it.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. So because the magazine having this very strong position in defense of people who had no voice, that the let's say the atmosphere of it was very favorable in that moment to have the possibility to create like a network with other journalists in other parts of the world. And that was mainly due to that presence in Algiers in 1973 of Neiva Moreira, the founder of the magazine, because being there in Algiers, he had the chance to be in contact with journalists from many countries, and also in contact with the liberation movements, for instance, from Palestine, from Angola, Mozambique. He was Brazilian. He passed away some 12 years ago, but he was Brazilian. So it was a natural relationship with the liberation movement from Angola, from Mozambique, from Timor, also who were there represented in Algiers. And in some way, that was the first step for a very important partnership or cooperation between our magazine and those liberation movements and other journalists all over the world. Here you see, for instance, the edition that was dedicated for the summit in Havana, who I covered, the Havana's Non-Aligned Movement Summit. One complete special edition in English, in Spanish, and in Portuguese. By the time the Portuguese edition was only distributed in Africa, that was a step that was particularly a consequence of the invitation that the magazine received from the MPLA in Angola, MPLA, and from Frelimo in Mozambique to try to visit the countries before independence and covering the last period of the colonial presence in those countries. And that was possible through an effort we did. The idea to be there was fantastic, but the way to make it possible, that was a very, very creative way we had to sell in advance articles about that period in Mozambique and in Angola for some of the media in Mexico that were interested, and so. Well, a very complicated period. But here you see, for instance, Timor were also in our pages. We always had 100% of our editions were dedicated to third world countries. That was the main idea, and to cover, if possible, through their own voices, not we Latin Americans writing about them, but if possible, them ourselves writing and analyzing their own situation. It was not easy to do that in that period because, for instance, in the Portuguese African countries, after independence, there were no journalists. The journalists before were Portuguese. So I myself, I was 3 or 4 times in Angola and 1 time in Mozambique for workshops with youngsters, trying to prepare them as journalists in this period that they didn't have the cadres. And so we had the chance to have the cooperation and also friendship of very important journalists, writers, thinkers, politicians. I quoted here José Ramos Horta from Timor, who is a Nobel Prize and former president, Somavia, who was later on the Secretary General of the Trade International Organization, Galeano, Rafael Roncagliolo, who will speak today in the Latin American session, who was the foreign affairs minister in Peru, Wilfred Burch, and some others. Yeah. Here there are some of the pictures I took when I covered. For instance, here is Mozambique's independence. Yeah. The parade in Mozambique, well, that was very touching and moment, yeah, to be there. We had been in Mozambique by the time for more than 2 months before. In the northern part of Mozambique, that was the period we covered the transitional government. The war in Lebanon was also, we always have been very related to Middle East. I myself, I covered Middle East for many, many times. That all the pictures I'm showing you are mine pictures, my own picture, because we didn't have the chance to send a journalist and a photographer. So I myself, I have to do both at the same time. This is one of the picture in Castello Beaufort, who is a medieval castle in the Litani River, where the progressive Lebanese and Palestinian forces were, let's say, trying to watch the Israeli movements, because that was the natural frontier between Israel and Lebanon when Israel for 20 years occupied the southern part of Lebanon. Yeah. We were in Beirut when it was invaded by Israel and bombed by Israel. By chance, just by chance, we were there. Well, Africa was present in our pages, all the editions. We have the compromise to have articles about Africa, about Asia, and about Latin America. That was a permanent, important sessions we have. These are photos of Mozambique on the left, the children who lost their families in war, and on the right is the draft in Somalia. With Somalia was we were there many times before the Americans destroyed the country in their invasions. Here is the northern part of Mozambique. One of the guerrilla men was also a teacher for those who had no more parents and were raised by Frelimo in schools they have specially for them. They are showing here they didn't have books or copybooks or bucket, so they have to use these little wooden pieces to write. That was a very important effort to be alphabetized. We wrote about women fighters. This woman was carrying water at this moment, but she told us, it was published of course, that during the war she was carrying weapons in her head. So this is the last moment of the Portuguese presence in Angola. We were there covering this for our magazine. This is part of the parade in Luanda, and the front, the military front, was 13 kilometers away in Kifangondo. So the parade was in a city that was very, very close to the war front, a very tense situation at any moment. The South African troops and the Zaire's troops could enter the city. I don't know if you are aware of the circumstances in which Angola declared its independence. This is all, in spite of that, that was a very important, memorable day for the people, of course, of Angolan people, and this is also the Independence Day. Many times we have been reporting on Somalia, that by the time with a socialist government, before all the problems they faced, the Palestinian question was a permanent preoccupation of our magazine to have information and interviews. And so this is a photo of mine in Lebanon, in refugee camp in Lebanon. Also the victims, in this case, the victims of the Israeli bombardment in 1984. We covered it. This is the Kamil Shamoun stadium that was bombed with the justification of the Israeli justification that the PLO had arms, weapons among the pillars of the stadium. It was not, of course, true. There were the donations of the Crescent, the Red Crescent, that were there, not weapons. That was a lie, fake news that we say. We covered the Iran-Iraq war, and many problems in Latin America were analyzed through our magazine, through our pages. So that's a very short experience. I can answer some question if you want. But what I can say, what I can add, is that in that Cold War scenario, and in a very difficult moment, particularly for South America, in the period of the cycle of dictatorships in Brazil, in Argentina, in Uruguay, in Chile, through the Mexican period, we could denounce those situations, denounce the genocide in the case of Lebanon, present for the Latin American public, and not only the Latin American public, the problem of apartheid, for instance. Before our magazine denounced apartheid in the early 70s, only a few in Latin America had the idea of what apartheid was, because as you may know, the Portuguese were the Portuguese also, of course, they didn't know about the situation in the Portuguese colonies, but the South Africans, the racism in South Africa was covered by an alliance in the media in favor of the apartheid regime. So I think the history of our magazine shows that what is possible, what was possible to do through the effort of a network of journalists who was built before internet, with the means we had in that period, but with the common aim to try to contribute to important information we were aware that was needed for our people to understand better the international and local situation. And that was our compromise with what was for us the main responsibility is to have a compromise with the people's liberation all over the world. So thank you. That was my, please, I am open to any question if you have.
Thank you, Beatriz. Dimitri, do you have some questions? The floor is open for questions.
May I have a more general question? But maybe it is we need first to speak to hear the other speakers. And given the enormous experience Beatriz had with third world movements and post-colonial states, I would like to ask her opinion on the reasons of the great failures also of those movements and those states. But I think this would be probably better to examine at the end of our session. Let's concentrate to the topic now.
Okay, so if everyone is okay with this, I can continue with my presentation.
Yeah, go on. No sign of Adama. So
yeah, we were supposed to have, just for information, Adama Wade, who was supposed to speak about information, communication, media, 60 years of the non-alignment movement, and an African perspective. Unfortunately, he is not present. So I'll take the stage. Just a second. Remarks.
You have put so many subjects in discussion that, to tell you the truth, I don't know what to ask you. But by the way, I have a very concrete question. You said that China is collecting much more data than the West because of the Western regulations. My impression from what I read in the Western press, and especially after the revelations of Snowden, etc., is that essentially everybody is in one way or another followed in the Western world, first of all. And second, I'm not sure if the regulation is really an obstacle to that, and I'm not sure if this regulation is respected by governments, by secret services, and by the forces which have the power to survey all of us. This is one question. The second question is that, of course, you gave an optimist also scenario about the evolution of artificial intelligence. Everybody is hoping that this scenario comes true. Still, it is providing also with an enormous capacity to create a new totalitarianism. And there is a more fundamental, have already developed enough technologies and productive forces to be able to satisfy more or less all needs of humanity. Maybe at this point, we should put the question why we need more of such technologies, which give us the impression or the illusion, or that we exercise more control over our lives, but in fact, they tend to transform us into the object of a crazy machine developing as it is. But I stop because I will open 1,000 questions if I continue.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. It's so first about the Snowden story. I think it shows how hypocrite the Western world is by spying on people and looking at everyone. They might not spy on me or you, but they have this capability to do so.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they are spying on me. Excuse me.
Oh yeah.
I believe they are spying. First of all, they are spying to all journalists, to all politicians, to all heads of enterprises, to all officers, and to all diplomats of a given country. I mean, even if they don't spy systematically on overall the population, they are already spying in the elite, because when you control elite, a country can elect, for example, Tsipras, and then even Tsipras does not know that he will do what he will do. I'm sure that we are already followed closely. I mean, people who can play a role in the evolution of our states and of our societies. But anyway, this is my idea. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't believe it.
Yeah, but we can also think how we speak about data privacy in the Western world, yet we are being listened to, whereas in China it's clear that they listen, and I just think that it's a little less hypocrite when it comes to using data, but that's only my opinion. Beatriz, I have a question for you. Actually, two questions.
Yeah, please.
So, if you could, because I believe we were observing quite interesting times. First, as you saw from my presentation, I'm very optimistic about technology. But this technology is happening today from the information revolution that happened in the 20th century. So what for you were the biggest cultural contributions of this information exchange from the magazine as well, when it comes to what is happening around the world?
I didn't understand quite clearly because it was interrupted. The experience of exchanging, you mean?
The biggest cultural contributions of the magazine.
Oh yeah, I understand. Information
exchange.
Yeah. You see, when we had the chance to hear or to read the analysis of people who don't you know directly, but you trust, because first of all, the network was based on mutual trust. Yeah. So what do you mean? What do I mean with this? The common vision of all the journalists, communicators, theorists, politicians. We also have some politicians who collaborate with us. The common ground was the aim to contribute to a clear vision of the third world countries' aims, challenges, experiences, etc. So in having this together in a magazine, in at least part of these visions, of course it was only a little experience by a monthly magazine, but it was the tool to enlarge the vision, the world vision of the readers, and we had a large community of readers because we were aware that each copy circulated in many hands through trade unions, associations of very different kinds. So I had the conviction by the time, and nowadays I am sure of that it was an important tool for Latin Americans, particularly, also for Africans who were reading our magazine in the Portuguese edition, and even for those who read the articles in English, to enlarge their vision of the world from the perspective of the third world countries. So I think that was the most important contribution. And I feel that today we have very important tools, but we just haven't had the chance to create such a network of these alternative, let's say, blogs. And so there is an initiative here in Latin America. They recently launched it. It is called Mandala, and they are trying to create this kind of network of blogs, of sites, progressive sites, etc. But we did this with no tools at all, voluntarily, and with a great effort. And I think that is inspiring as an example of for today's journalists and bloggers. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your. I would just have a comment on your presentation, an extraordinary, interesting presentation. I was invited in late October last year, 2019, to China, to the Southwest University in Shanghai, for a conference, international conference on AE in education and communication. Yeah, I was surprised by the invitation because I'm not expert on artificial intelligence. So, but they told me, no, we are sure that you will contribute with your experience as journalist and nowadays as a professor at the university. So you have the both experiences of education and journalism. And so I had to read and to prepare my presentation. And I focuses, of course, on the data. That's the point I would address. you mentioned, and I have read and prepared on it, my presentation, the huge amount of data which is needed to prepare the machines, let's say. So that is the big, for me, the big, the key problem. I'm not sure if I am wrong, but which kind of data? Of course, it is such a huge quantity that you may say, well, it is not BS you can give to the machine. But are we sure of that? What do you think? Or could be the possibility of giving in such direction the data that wouldn't allow the machine to have a big picture of the problem? Well, that's the key question that I have addressed, and mainly my conclusion and what my message was to the conference, and it was a very interesting conference. Unfortunately, some of the sessions were exclusively in Chinese with no interpretation. But my main message was we have to be aware of the education of the engineers who are going to work with the AI to create a very ethical sense of responsibility for them. What do you think about?
Hi, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I got kicked out from my internet. So yes, very good remark. Well, first of all, we need a lot of data to train those models, and it used to be very expensive. It used to cost in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to train artificial intelligence algorithm. But today it's more democratizing because there's much more data available, and it's in more like the tens of thousands. Second, the algorithm will be is dependent on the data. So if you feed the algorithm with what we can call bad data, you will get a bad algorithm, and it will give you bad results. So there's a saying that is garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you put in the machine, the output will have its qualities.
So instead of saying garbage in, you say totalitarian ideas in.
This is another point. This is another point. It touches on the bias, on the biases of the data, and it's also related to ethics in this development. So
that was my point.
Yeah. In my company, we understood that we cannot only have the experts on AI, the data scientists, working on a problem. They need to collaborate with the people that understand the business, the problematic, so that they can help the expert feed the right data into the machine. And then it comes also, so first you have, is it the right data? And then second, is the data objective? If it's, for example, if you have on the table only white males, the data probably will not be that objective. So the more diverse background of collaboration that you have, having women, having people from different ethnicities, etc., that are able to say, okay, this data represents also my vision. The more different cultures, ethnicities, point of views you have when preparing the data to feed the algorithm, the better, and the less bias you will get after that. Yeah.
So that's a key point, I think. Yeah, a key point.
It's data ethics is the next big thing to look at. You see Google is having a lot of trouble today with the ethics, and it's very important. I think we have,
there are two persons who are willing to put some questions. I think two hands are raised.
So, but before that, I saw Nabila writing a question, so I will just read it.
Yeah, and I have to chair a round table in some minutes, so we have to.
All right. So if humans, corporations, and states are making artificial intelligence, and the current world order is one of disproportionate global dominance, it is reasonable to think AI will be used for that purpose too. For those of us here and in the global south who are attached to justice and are wary of the rollout of AI-supported surveillance, are there elements in the China example which could be inspiring or useful to comparison to Western entities? So I'm not sure I understand. Is it because everyone is talking about the AI surveillance, the elements in China that could be inspiring and useful regarding the civil? Nabila, can you explain your question?
Hi, I will just come in, sorry.
Yeah.
No, I was wondering, I mean, I followed the presentation, it's very interesting to see how China invested into AI. I'm more worried from our experiences here in Europe and in the US of how surveillance is rolled out in places like schools or even public services supported by AI. And I'm less familiar with the case of China. So I'm wondering, and I don't presuppose that they are rolling it out exactly in the same way. Maybe there are things that they're doing that we could learn from in terms of, to resist a spread out of AI that is not useful, that is really used to surveil and to spy and to control. The element of control, I think, is very important. Maybe there are things that we could look into over there. I don't suspect you have the answer. I don't just imagine you have the answer to everything, but
I can just comment a little bit, and I want to hear the other questions as well. So what I think is, first, China definitely is having surveillance. I've seen systems like cameras in the entrance of a company. And when you walk in, it scans you real time. It tells you who you are and all those different types of data parameters just by scanning you, and it's real time, and it's very, very frightening. But what I think China can give us as an example to the Western world is just, let's put it that way. Companies in China are much more open to collaborate and share. So when, for example, a telecommunications company in China, like China Mobile, develops a very advanced algorithms, it offers them to the government, but also to other companies, and they create this environment where they collaborate to provide better services for the consumers. But then we can also debate this and say, yes, but do the consumers need it? And to this, I don't have the question. If you think 10 years ago, did we need iPhones? Maybe not, but somebody came up with it and we started using them. Thank you for this remark.
I think, Tsvetelin, 5G smartphones are using us and we are not using them.
Yeah.
But by the way, there is another question, which maybe it is near Nabila's problematic. The fact is that, okay, China can do whatever it does. It can have negative consequences probably in its own social development, and also, but it can provide it with some tools in international competition. America can do the same. Probably Russia and the Europeans, I'm not sure, but there is a lot of other countries in the world which will be doomed to become data colonies. What is happening with them? we must begin to think of the creation of systems of internet and of separate systems if we are not able to create an artificial intelligence, if we are not able to create a really international system controlled by in some democratic way. Otherwise, the vast majority of the countries of the world are doomed to become colonies of those, at least in that domain of those powers.
Yeah, this is unfortunately where it might lead us. The Western world might use more and more U.S. American systems, and China
Israeli systems also, which are playing a huge role, but they don't claim it.
May we hear the two questions, because I have to leave in 5 minutes.
All right. Isabel, can we hear your question?
Hello. I would like to start by saying thank you to Bissio and Anastasov for the excellent presentations. And I have a question for Anastasov. I'm conducting a research with Bissio as my advisor, and about the dispute between the US and China in technology with emphasis in social media. I would like to hear a commentary about the difficulties that China may encounter about the use of servers and infrastructure of the US and but predominantly the US, when dealing with users of other countries, like Americans, by the.
Okay. And Julia, can we hear your question as well?
Hi. It's more of a reflection, I guess, for Dr. Beatriz Bissio, but that also Dr. Konstantakopoulos has touched upon, for us to think nowadays of how it was 60 years ago. And Cadernos do Terceiro Mundo played an important role on helping us from what is called today the Global South to think about sovereignty. So the times and the feelings were extremely different then. When we talk about the independence and the revolutions that the Cadernos do Terceiro Mundo brought to us, and the feeling of the people of those countries being able to have their own voice. 60 years on now, after the conference of the non-aligned movements, the initial one, when we think about these issues, and your presentation on AI has brought some light into that, it doesn't matter how much technology advances, but it's completely different to think how people thought of sovereignty and independence. So my question to Dr. Bissio for us to think about the present is, what is lacking? What is the difference between then and now as far as the human factors go? How can we think of a better future? Because back then people thought about changing the world and not just having access to technology or something like that. So it's just for us to think of the future. Thank you.
Beatriz?
Shall I start, or perhaps you respond to answer to Isabel? I don't know which order.
You need to jump on another session.
Yeah, 8 o'clock we have the Latin American session. Yeah. Okay, well, Julia, the answer is not easy. It's Dimitris also at the beginning asked me about the failure of the African political processes. There are no single nor simple answers. I can risk to put one or two of the possibilities of analysis. Yeah, in the case of Dimitris, first to answer why the failure of some African processes. One of the answers is that the main leaders of those processes were assassinated, were murdered, or died in the case of Agostinho Neto, for instance. Yeah. So that the lack of the leadership, of the more compromised leadership with those processes was one of the answers. But the other one was the point that was very well analyzed by non-aligned countries, the necessity of a new economic order. That means to rethink and rebuild all the world economy, because we know very well in Latin America, we know that we were colonies one century before, and our independence were 1 century before, but we still are in some way controlled by where the North, by the multinationals, the transnationals, by the monopolies. So sovereignty again in this case, with this way of organizing the international economy is very smooth, you see. So, well, it's a very complex analysis we need to have for this. But for Julia, in particular, I think that having in that period, living in that period in the Cold War, yeah, and being in Latin America part of the Monroe Doctrine, so the U.S. backyard, yeah, in some way we have a very present, concrete adversary, let's say, or enemy to fight, yeah. And we have the other possibility. So there was a project in our eyes that we can aim to refer to as a socialist different project, even though, of course, we know that all the problems that project had and finally led to the defeat. So I think the moment was a moment of a very concrete class and political struggle. In this moment, the problems are still there. The problems perhaps are deeper and more challenging than then, but for people to understand that is more complicated. The possibility of a deep, concrete analysis of reality nowadays, in my view, is more difficult for those who are not integrated in some way in trade unions or political parties or social movements with a strong discussion and political education. We lack in this moment of political education of our basis. I think in Brazil we have this very clearly. People are induced by fake news, by mass media, massively trying not to address the real motives of the crisis. Yeah, they are avoiding the possibility of development critical minds of the people, and we were not and we are not able to reach that people with the correct addressing correctly the problems. Cuadernos del Tercer Mundo was read by the elite. Dimitris said it very correctly. If you can dominate the elite, you will dominate the process. And Cuadernos del Tercer Mundo was read by the elite, the political leftist progressive elite. So the mind of the elite was clear. So the mass movements politically were advancing in their comprehension of political reality through this contact with elite. I think in this moment we have this problem. I'm not sure if I'm clear. Yeah. But well, that's what I possibly can elaborate in a few minutes from very, very complicated and of course important problems we are facing nowadays. I would like to thank you very much for the invitation to present my experience in this session, but being 8 o'clock, I have to be at the other session.
Thank you.
My thank you very much. I'm very grateful to have been with you to share the experience. You can continue, of course, if you I say goodbye to all of you and see you in other sessions. Dimitris and Anastasov, a pleasure, and my dear Isabel, Julia, and others who are here with us, all of you, my hug for you. So, bye-bye.
Thank you, Beatriz.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Great comment. All right. So, Isabel, yes, the USA-China technological collaboration, can we put it that way, when it comes to social media and the usage of China of US servers. Well, it is a complicated question, and especially in today's world where we see more and more division between both countries. Every country wants to work with its proper systems and technologies and servers. I'm not sure to what point Chinese would want to use and work with US servers, because as far as I know, most of the Western social media are not allowed in China, and we see that USA is also stopping the access to Chinese media in the US. So it's very very tough one. Maybe we can look for the data, how the data centers space is advancing, because in the geopolitics around data centers, there are a lot of things happening right now. I just saw, for information for Europe, we're going to have OVH Cloud, which is the European French cloud provider, which will partner with Atos, a IT consulting company, to create a pan-European cloud. So we see this division per regions when it comes to cloud, but also data centers, servers. So I'm not sure. I don't think I answered your question, but it's just what comes top of mind right now.
Yeah, I asked this because this was a commentary made about my work that I submitted. They asked me about this, like, how are you gonna operate with user outside China, because they are aiming user from all over the world. If they're using they're not operating their own system, they're operating in the system of the other countries. How they gonna surpass this problem, this issue?
Yeah, well, I think it's an infrastructure problem. And when we see how China is investing in infrastructure in Southeast Asia, but also Africa, I could see them not having that much of a problem, because all it takes is to build a data center in Africa and aggregate all of the data of the African countries and operate from there. So I think it's eventually the usage of servers. It's just an infrastructure problem, and I tend to think that they would figure this out if they haven't yet. But I want to touch on the points made by Dimitris about the new colonialism, and it's extremely frightening. I come from I don't know if we're a third world country, Bulgaria, but it's a small country, and throughout history we've been between the West and the East, the two blocks. And right now we see the West and the China zone of influence. So yes, we can argue that the future colonialism will be around access to technology, around who gets to exploit more of the data available, and data available is basically users. So providing free services to users in different countries eventually helps you get more and more of this raw material data that would further allow you to develop more and more advanced artificial intelligence. Just a remark. Dimitris, do you have other remarks? Do you guys have other questions?
I have something.
Somebody has questions? We can hear your remarks, Dimitri, and maybe close the session.
I would like, by the way, to tell you, as it is a communications session, that in 2015, in the wake of, as the Greek revolt somehow was developing against the neoliberal disastrous program imposed upon Greece, we have created, and there was also a big international interest on Greece, a group of intellectuals, international intellectuals, including me. We have created a site, Defend Democracy Press, which, of course, we suffered afterwards because of the defeat and of the disappointment internationally, which this defeat has provoked, helping the rise of the far right in both the United States and Europe. But still, this site exists. We are trying to make as much as we can of our meager in order to connect people between themselves, to citizen persons resisting the present situation in the world. Of you who want to cooperate, we are open to any kind of cooperation, and we strongly believe to the need of networking people who otherwise would not know each other and would not be able to know ideas which maybe are developed in Bulgaria, but they can be also useful in Chile. They are developed in Australia, but some French people, imperialism and capitalism are doing this massively. So we have to try to do it ourselves. So we're very much open. You will be welcome to write, for instance, my Tsvetelin and geographically Negbur. I'm waiting your article on China and artificial intelligence, which is already practically ready.
Okay.
So everybody who wants to who has ideas or wants to propose articles or whatever form of cooperation, welcomed.
Great. Yeah, I do believe of the power of networking and in sharing of ideas. And this is also why I'm so excited about this space of the technology and advancements of technology space, because I see that even though there are some dangers, of course, down the road, and we need to be mindful about them, I see much more this international cooperation and multilateral development of be it systems, companies, and so on. So yes, okay. So if you guys don't have other questions, we can close the session. Guillaume, what do you think? Guillaume, are you there? Maybe you're not. All right. Thank you all for being present. It was lovely speaking and hearing your questions.
Thank you all for coming.
You're welcome.
You.
Who were the students that were taking notes?
I was.